Avon and Somerset police have paid out what's been called a substantial out-of-court settlement to kill the bill protesters, but of course won't accept liability, nor will they apologise for their arrests and assaults. It's been said that last year 5 people who attended a Kill the Bill protest were attacked by Avon and Somerset police while trying to clear College Green in Bristol of the protesters. The 5 individuals all took action against Avon and Somerset police after the incident on the 21st of March 2021.
For 1 hour, several hours ago. Crowd will now disperse, or force may be used. I repeat, crowd will now disperse, or force may be used. No further warnings will be given.
They were said to have taken part in a sit-down protest organised by the Gypsy, Roma and Traveller community because the 5 themselves lived in their vans. Many of you may have heard of the phrase van life. The reason they took part was due to the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Bill, which would have increased police and government powers to act against those who simply want to live in their vans or other motorised accommodation. However, even though this was a sit-down protest, when police arrived and were ordered to disperse the protesters due to so-called COVID-19 rules, it all went to shit and descended into violence between protesters and police. One of the 5 said she had never experienced such violence from the police before. Despite making the payments, Avon and Somerset police have said that they deny the allegations of police brutality made as part of the claims, and that each of the financial settlements were made with the 5 without admission of liability. But of course, without admission, would we expect anything other than blatant refusal to accept your wrongdoings? Now, to give you an idea of how the police and local councils do work together rather than being separate entities and impartial, it seems that police took action due to a letter from the Mayor of Bristol where he described city leaders from 22 individuals and organisations condemning the protests, including the Diocese of Bristol. Now, I might be wrong here, but just because somebody condemns something doesn't make it illegal or unlawful, and the police should have looked at the situation before simply deciding to act on the whim of the mayor. However, even though Bristol's Cathedral were one of the 22 at the time, after the incident they decided that they didn't want to be associated with the way the protesters were treated anymore and tried to distance themselves by publicly condemning the treatment of the protesters. Bit late for repenting, isn't it, Diocese of Bristol? You still had your part to play. In fact, a letter from Bristol Cathedral leaders said the testimony of those who had been present on March 23rd was extremely distressing. They repeatedly stressed that it had been a peaceful protest and that at no time was any violence done to the police or property. They described being herded and kettled by the police, being ordered to move on but with no way of leaving the area. The speed of the attempted dispersal was such that people were confused by what was expected of them, frightened and unable to collect their belongings safely. Witnesses spoke of seeing individuals punched, kicked and forced to the ground using riot shields. It was clear that those who had been there were and remained deeply traumatised by their experiences and by what they witnessed. Many were in tears and visibly distressed by recounting the events of that evening. Now, apparently video footage from the protest, which I haven't seen by the way, is said to show one person sitting, being grabbed by his hair and dragged away. People hit with riot shields and batons whilst the protest descended into something akin to a riot. At another protest later that same week, it said that more violence erupted as Avon and Somerset police got themselves involved, where police were seen slamming the bottom edge of their riot shields down onto the heads and bodies of sitting protesters. A tactic that was described as legitimate and lawful by a police chief the following day, who said the tactics were how the police had been trained and were supposed to look scary. A spokesperson for Avon and Somerset police said that the police denied and disputed the allegations made by the 5 people who began legal action against them, and said paying damages was done with no admission of liability. We can confirm Avon and Somerset police has settled claims brought by 5 people in relation to the decision to disperse them from College Green, Bristol on the 23rd of March 2021 when COVID-19 restrictions were in place. Several allegations were made as part of the various claims. Those allegations were denied by Avon and Somerset police, and each of the settlements were made without admitting admission of liability. Without doubt, I'm completely not surprised about the lack of admission of liability, but let's be honest, if the police believed they had a leg to stand on, they wouldn't have paid out and would have instead taken the matter to court. It was easy to say that there's no admittance of liability, but we all know actions speak way louder than words. And yes, for those of you who keep reminding me, I know the payout comes from the taxpayer, but once it's handed to the police, it's the police's money to do with what they will. So when I speak about a police force paying out, I do understand where the money comes from. But it's the same as saying that your boss paid for your rent or paid for your night out at the weekend just because the money came from your work. Not knocking anyone, just pointing it out, just making it clear that I do understand how it works, but I want to try and put across these videos in a way that everybody understands. And most people know that the police are paid by the public, but when you turn around and say the police paid out of the public's money, some people are going to be confused by that, whereas it's easier for me to say the police paid out and allowing the people watching a video to know themselves that that money has come from public taxes, etc.